to this week's video brought to you by the New London Counseling Center. The other day I was talking to a friend and she just had this moment of breakdown. She had a day where she lost her cool on everybody in her house, her kids, her dog, her husband, everybody. And she felt really guilty about it. And so we were kind of talking about that and what that experience was like for her. And it got me thinking, the reality is that I don't think any of us have managed to get through the quarantine to this point without having one of those days, or at least one of those moments where you just lose it. Maybe you lose it at a situation, maybe you lose it on somebody else, or maybe you lose it on yourself. But either way, I think we have all had those moments where we just break down and we do things that we regret. We say things that we regret. We think thoughts that we regret. And so how do we deal with that? How do you repair that and respond to that? And so that's what I want to talk about today, because that I think is a pretty common experience, that we all have days or moments that we wish we could take back or we could redo. And the reality is that we can't. But there is something that we can do now to help with that. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, which is compassion. And before I talk about compassion, really I have to talk about suffering. Suffering is something that every human experiences. It is an inevitable part of our experience. There's nobody on this planet who does not suffer at some point in their lives. Now that suffering might look different. It might look like hunger or fatigue or stress, relationship problems, or loss of a loved one, or pain, or mental illness. Whatever it is, there is suffering there. There is suffering to be found. We can't escape it, but we can bring meaning to it. And when we do that, we are responding with compassion. And compassion actually means to be with suffering. Nobody really wants to talk about suffering or think about it too much, but the fact is that in order to relieve suffering, we have to bring awareness to it so that we can bring then compassion to it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to be compassionate. And I'm mostly going to talk about it from the framework of compassionate with ourselves. How can we be compassionate, loving, and kind, and forgiving to ourselves? The good news is that compassion is something that can change our brains. So with practice, with experience, you literally change the way that your brain works. This might be something that's really uncomfortable for you. Maybe you're somebody who is really hard on yourself, and so you find it difficult to have self-compassion or self-love. But it is something that can be learned. Often when we think of compassion, we think about it as something that we give away, as something that is for us to give to others, but not necessarily to ourselves. Research done by Brene Brown shows that actually we cannot give compassion to others until we treat ourselves with compassion. And that's a very different approach. Her research also found that people that are living wholeheartedly, as she refers to it, understand and live in a way that sends this message. You are imperfect, and you are hardwired to struggle or to suffer. But you are worthy of being loved and belonging. So people that are really living fully alive get that, and they have the courage to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, and to show themselves compassion. We are all going to make mistakes, and we are all going to have days or moments that we regret and we wish we could redo. No matter how hard you try, you will mess up again, because you are an imperfect creature. It's the repair that really matters. It's the asking for forgiveness from somebody else, from God, or from ourselves. Sometimes that apology needs to be directed at ourselves because we are overly self-critical, or we're self-degrading. We talk mean to ourselves, or we tell ourselves negative things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I don't belong, I'm never going to get this right. And sometimes we expect perfection, and then we get really hard on ourselves when we can't achieve that, because it is unachievable. So for whatever the reason might be, sometimes that compassion, that forgiveness needs to be directed at ourselves. So this might be uncomfortable for some of us because it's not the way that we normally relate to ourselves. But I encourage you to try this simple exercise and just see how it goes. So take a minute to conjure up a scenario in your mind of something that you are struggling with, or or something that is difficult for you. Picture something that's not too painful, but a situation that you really find difficult, maybe even a little bit of suffering in. Maybe you messed up or regretted something that you did or you said, or maybe you're just not embodying the virtues that you wish that you had, like patience and caring and kindness or something like that. But go ahead and think of that scenario. Maybe you're struggling with parenting or a relationship, being kind to coworkers, or just being gentle with yourself. Picture the details of this scenario, what you feel about that scenario. And tell yourself something like this: this suffering is real for me. This struggle is real. Now begin to expand your viewpoint of that suffering and realize that all humans suffer. All humans struggle. Your feelings are not isolated. You are not alone in struggling. People all over the world are suffering in difficult situations right now. It is an unavoidable part of the human experience. Now that we recognize and understand that everyone struggles, let's find some compassion for ourselves around that struggle. So say something to yourself like, may I be kind to myself right now? Let me just give myself a break. You might even want to give yourself a gentle, compassionate touch, like putting your hand softly over your heart. Or maybe wrapping your arms around your body and embracing yourself in a hug. As if you were reassuring a good friend or a loved one who is really struggling. You deserve that same kind of compassion. Sit with that feeling for a minute and imagine that feeling of giving yourself warmth and kindness and love and reassurance that you are okay, that you are not perfect, and that is okay, and you can still find compassion for yourself in that imperfection. And let's be open to the ideal right now that no matter how you're feeling, it's okay. No matter what your experience is like in this moment of giving yourself compassion, whether it's something that's very difficult for you or something that comes very naturally, that is all right. You may not feel better at this exact moment, but you are planting a seed of compassion. And that seed can grow, and that seed can eventually change your brain and the way that your brain works. Each time you practice self-compassion, you are reinforcing parts of your brain that will eventually, over time, change. So our minds are incredibly powerful for changing our brains. Let's harness that power into something good. Let's use our minds and choose to think positively, to think gratefully, to feel compassionately. And when we do that, we are changing the way that our brains and our minds work together. If you want to learn more about how the brain and the mind work together, and about neuroscience and how to actually use tools to change the way that those things operate, then please consider signing up for our mindfulness-based cognitive therapy course. It'll be starting soon, and you can go to our website, newlondoncounselingcenter.com, to get more information. Have a great week.
New London Counseling Center is still offering telehealth services to both new and existing clients regardless of financial situation. If you or someone you know would like to schedule an appointment with a member of our licensed clinical team, call 484-746-3112. Thank you for watching and for the generous contributions of those who have made mental health care accessible in our community. Want to take a more in-depth look at how to unwind, recharge, and live life with less stress and more calm? Follow the link in the description to sign up for alerts on our upcoming mindfulness-based cognitive therapy class.